In the year 2050, there'll be 9 billion people. How do we feed them safely, fairly, and well? And make sure every mouth is fed.
In the kitchens of the future, say the chefs of Peru, food will be cooked amid the flames of love.
Without love, you cannot be a chef.
And eaten with wisdom.
In the future, people will concentrate on eating better, not eating more.
With chefs, our guiding light.
What's more nutritious and what's not? It's very important that we learn about that, no?
Peru's rock star chefs hoping to inspire us all.
Peru is like a laboratory. You can apply its discoveries to the rest of the world.
They have their own vision of future food.
I think it's about time to stop and look a little more at the past.
But are Peru's chefs right in claiming the past can show us how to feed the future? On the coast of the Pacific, Lima, the capital of Peru, has become the center of a revolution in gastronomy. Every year, tens of thousands flock to its festival of agricultural biodiversity. Peru's newly found reputation for cuisine based on fresh ingredients supplied by traditional organic farmers like Emilia.
This is yanasara, used to prepare our purple corn drink. This also helps relieve pregnancy inflammation.
Traditional local produce challenging chefs to find new ways of cooking. Crops produced by farmers guaranteed a fair living. These are the ingredients Peru's radical chefs are using to challenge processed food and high-intensity farming. The guru of this revolution, Gaston Acurio, one of the world's top dozen chefs. Future food, he says, also means future justice.
It is clear that finally, after centuries, there is a different outlook between the diners of the city and the Peruvian farmers. Peru is the only country in the world where cuisine is no longer about playing frivolous games, insensitive games, and has instead become an authentic social weapon.
But could using food and cuisine as a social weapon be a risk?
It would be very dangerous for us to completely go away from high-input agriculture until we figured out that we can produce enough food with lower input, more agroecological approaches. So I think it's prudent for us to continue both of those kind of systems.
Ayacucho, 300 miles from Lima, and the Andes Mountains. Still haunted by memories of a bloodthirsty Maoist insurgency and police brutality. 3 decades ago, a country tearing itself apart, where you couldn't dine out at all for fear of terrorist bombs or the secret police. But today, the men in jeeps are chefs from Lima, here to meet the farmers and their leader, Edilberto. Top Lima chef Ivan Kisic riding out with fellow chefs and farmers who grow his food. It's a demonstration of solidarity, a trip back in time to pay homage to Pachamama, Mother Earth.
You share a bit with the farmers, and you live the experience of harvesting, making offerings to the land and respect for the Pachamama. And this will result in us revaluing our land, which is what we are aiming for, to revalue what we have now in Peru.
They've ridden far away from the world of monocrop prairies and factory farms, burgers, soda, and sliced bread. By thanking Mother Earth, these chefs and farmers are pledging themselves to a different kind of future food and future farming. They believe the secret to a sustainable future lies in the past, in the mountains which were once a birthplace of world agriculture.
Peru has the capacity to solve the problem of food availability in this country. And it's not just about food, because we also have our history and culture, and we have roots here from thousands of years ago. While in Mesopotamia they were domesticating wheat, here in Peru we were doing that with the potato about 8,000 years ago.
They're ceremonially planting seed potatoes in homage to the past. But these farmers also rely on potatoes for food and a living. Growing potatoes organically, no artificial fertilizers, fungicides, and little technology. What Ivan and the other chefs believe, there should still be a future for old farming methods, traditional crops, and small farmers.
For many years, we chefs have found it really unfair that the principal producers, who make it possible for us to cook and to have food on our tables, do not have a decent life. So we are moving on very quickly in terms of technology and cuisine. And I think it's about time to stop for a while and look a little more at the past.
But is there really a message for the world in Peru's ancient farming culture? Peru's geography, high mountains and lush jungles, doesn't particularly favor modern agricultural practices. Small farmers with niche products go with the terrain and have done for millennia.
Although geographically Peru is not really suitable for agriculture, ancient Peruvians developed agriculture even in the high peaks in the Andes. Currently, the main producers of these goods are still the small-scale farmers and the rural and native communities.
If we think about Peru as a country 20 years ago, we would have thought that it was a country, a failed state. And the food revolution that we're experiencing now has really given the country an opportunity for building peace and for contributing to social inclusion. And now people living in most remote places in Peru, they have a sense of self-esteem and self-worth, which they never had 20 years ago.
200 kilometers north of Lima, the Huaraz Highlands. Margarita's both farmer and cook.
This dish is made with herbs and many potatoes. I learned to cook this from my mother. Every potato has its different flavor and taste. Only women can keep in their memories the names of the potatoes. In our fair, we swap potatoes and so we can restore these old varieties.
Margarita and her neighbors grow old varieties of potato people haven't even heard of outside the Andes. Ancient food and ancient agricultural practices. Low input organic farming. So why can't these mountain crops compete better with all the bread and noodles invading Peru? In Lima, there are people who believe they can, especially at Peru's International Potato Center. Margaritas come to meet Dr. Maria Skura, who's responsible for preserving Peru's potato heritage.
So, let's have a look at the potatoes you have brought here. Wow, look at these beautiful potatoes.
This potato is called black bullhorn. This potato is called puma hand. This is long side. This is beautiful white potato. This is beautiful but blue.
Ancient potatoes, a little more romantic than modern grain and wheat hybrids.
Thank you. CIP and humankind, thank you, because you have been able to keep these precious potatoes as a food source for the future of us all.
Malabar, one of the world's top restaurants, the creation of Pedro Miguel Schiaffino. He prizes Peru's ancient potatoes for their taste, variety, and nutritional value. Precious old potatoes found not just in museums.
Los chips de papa.
You've never seen eggs and chips like this.
Y este sería el tercer plato con papas nativas.
So, what does Pedro make of Margarita's latest shipment from the Andes?
Let's see what we have here. Look at these beautiful potatoes. Wow, nice. We've been working with native potatoes for several years, about 6 or 7 years before native potatoes were known about, or eaten as they are eaten right now. I first knew of them as gift potatoes, with shapes, colors, flavors, and textures, thin skins, thick skins, sweet and bitter. The future will rely not on the quantity of food we have. Instead, we're going to go through a process of selection, and we're going to pick the more nutritious food.
And potatoes are not alone among those forgotten future foods from the past. In an unfashionable Lima suburb, behind an unmarked door, meet the followers of radical chef Xavier Wong. Working from home, Javier became one of Lima's most renowned chefs entirely through, well, word of mouth. Fresh fish and fresh vegetables. No potatoes, few carbohydrates. A brief chat and a dish designed and cooked just for you. With love.
Without love, you cannot be a chef. A cook has to be a pragmatic dreamer. In the case of gastronomy, we have that license. We do not have antagonisms. That's why we can make dreams come true.
Every day, Javier's off to market. He's looking not just for fresh fish, but for old crops wrongly neglected. Future food from the Andes and the Amazon.
The Amazon is the future of food supply and the cure of many diseases. This is the pituca, or Chinese potato. This grows in wild forms in the boundaries between the highlands and the jungle. It is growing massively, and its flour is much more nutritious than wheat flour. And the price for a kilo of noodles made of this powder will not be more than 10 US cents.
In a more fashionable Lima suburb, another unmarked restaurant. Chef Pedro Miguel about to open his new venture, Amaz, devoted to the Amazon. An ancient, overlooked food source for the future.
The Amazon cuisine, which is shared by 9 different countries, is not yet widely spread. So, products from the Amazon are really important because they can contribute to the food sources for the future.
Not everyone in Lima can dine in world-class restaurants. A people's canteen, one of many in Lima's poor suburbs. No fancy diners here, these are the homeless and welfare recipients. But they're not eating canned soup or junk food. Lima's top chefs cater for the poor too. The menu here, designed by the late Maria Santos, whose daughter Elena's now in charge. Elena's also looking for nutritious new ingredients from old places, like the Amazon and Andes.
There are plenty of products that we don't know about. It's very important. The whole country knows what we really have. What's more nutritious and what's not. It's very important that we learn about that, no?
There's forgotten nutritious food from the seas too. 5 in the morning in Lima's vast fish market, supplying restaurants, shops and canteens. There's one fish that we couldn't find, the humble anchoveta. The reason, it's taken straight from the boats, big and small, to be pulped and fed to farmed salmon and chicken, largely abroad. Peru and its fishing industry do well out of this lucrative global trade. But the anchoveta boats could instead be feeding Peru's poor, according to this former fishing minister.
So far, all the attempts to preserve the world's ecosystem have been focused on land species rather than the marine species, which I think will be the future world food source. Anchoveta is probably one of the most nutritious species because of its high fat content. It's widely available and can be effectively used for direct human consumption.
With a bit of flair, the humble old anchoveta could be just as fashionable as 21st century farmed salmon. And here's another way the chefs can help. Flavio Solozano is off driving 30 miles to the cooking school in the shanty town of Pachuca. 100,000 people living in the desert sands, a fifth of their children anemic. Flavio teaches a free monthly masterclass. Other top Lima chefs helping out too. They're training shantytown kids to be professional chefs and helping the poor to eat better by cooking better, including with humble anchoveta.
So what we should do are things like this, using it in causa, fried, in charquican, in whatever you want. We should promote the consumption of anchoveta.
Here in the desert cooking school, Flavio has a lesson for the world. Peru is a country of old and forgotten foods that can feed both Peru and other countries with larger and often more fertile lands.
Peru is like a laboratory. You can apply its discoveries to the rest of the world, where there is much more land. In the near future, we hope the consumption of quinoa and other grains from the Andes will be common, recognized as part of people's everyday life.
With Peru's cornucopia of crops, it's easy to believe opportunities to feed Peruvians fairly and tastily in the future have been overlooked.
As we have already shown through the native potato revolution, our country has enough resources to be self-sustainable and even to give to the world. But those resources, like the farmers, were not appreciated for a long time.
Peru is a tourist brochure country, its exotic variety of food crops reflecting its varied landscapes. Whether majestic mountains or the Amazon rainforest, people are closely attached to the land. In Peru's markets, organic produce is cherished. People and nature form a closely knit ecology. Farm animals, like part of the family. It's this biodiverse ancient tapestry Peru's chefs want to preserve for the future.
Imagine changing a small piece of land where you can have a couple of dozen varieties of potato
Imagine changing the geography of a place where there is a lot of variety of crops all helping each other into monocrop farming.
Peru's chefs are changing the global debate over the future of food and farming. The most influential, Gaston Acurio, has been called a politician working as a chef. Gaston and Xavier Wong have been active in politics, fighting moves to legalize genetically modified or GM crops, insisting they're not needed, at least in Peru.
We succeeded in persuading the president not to sign a bill in favor of GM crops. I think that's the first for chefs.
Feeding the world's soaring population with organic food and old farming ways. Even Peru's celebrated chefs recognize their dream may not be the only answer. At Lima's Agricultural University, they say we just can't afford to ignore the new. In his high-tech lab, top microbiologist Dr. Marcel Gutierrez says the old organic ways are great, but the figures just don't add up.
If we were thinking about establishing organic agriculture in the planet, we would actually need 2 planet Earths. This is the surface area we would need to feed the population in the year 2050. And this is not possible. And it is also not possible to deplete our forests. We need to take care of the Amazon. So the best choice is to make land more productive.
And the answer, students here learn, science and technology, including genetically modified GM transgenic crops. More bang for our bucks than nature alone will allow.
We are not saying that modern biotechnology, that means genetic engineering, is the only way. What we are saying is that without this technology, it is much harder to ensure food sources for this population that is coming up to over 9 billion and will require food production to increase by 70%. Without modern biotechnology, this won't be possible.
Students and teachers at the university sell their own produce, sometimes organic. But they've no objection to local farms using the technology that keeps so much of the world supplied with food.
It is silly, I think, to confront biotech and GM farming with organic and pretend it's a discussion between white and black, or to pretend that organic agriculture is a return to the past and poverty. An agriculture with GM is a major advance for the use of modern technology.
So will we have to rely on the new to stock the shelves of the future as the world's population expands to 9 billion? Or can we also depend on the old? What do studies from the world's universities show?
Recent studies have shown that lower input, more organic approaches to farming can feed a larger portion of the world's population than we had previously thought. There's open debate about it in the scientific fields, but the reason why it's important is that currently we feed large populations in the world by high input farming, which is not sustainable in the long run because it relies on fossil fuels which will run out and which will become more expensive over time. And they are becoming more expensive over time. So this is important for us to build these kinds of forms of farming that one can maybe not produce as high yields as the most high input farming, but produce yields that are high enough to feed the world's population, especially in local areas and especially in special markets.
In Lima, it's supermarkets, not super chefs, who feed most people. So could more of us really have a future with more low-input but high-taste food? Supporters of Lima's chefs say yes. The real challenge is to use food more intelligently.
What's true is that our planet, with our current agricultural practices, is producing enough, and hunger is not a consequence of the lack of food, but a consequence of bad distribution of food. And it's also a consequence of bad consumption habits in a lot of people.
Across town, it's the launch of Peru's Native Potato Festival. For Peru's radical chefs, another chance to push their message. Feeding the future means a fair deal for farmers.
Clearly, we as chefs are in a privileged position, and it's our duty to make sure those involved in this chain have the same benefits, opportunities, and successes that we have.
Local alliance, global implications. The world's third biggest staple crop, the potato, could feed still more.
I believe the most important thing for us is to seal this alliance. Seal this alliance based on trust, approach and values between farmers and chefs. We Peruvian farmers are able to feed the Peruvian population and the planet.
If the rest of the world really replicates the Peruvian model and people in the rest of the world start being so interested as Peruvians in their food and in their history and in their gastronomy, this will bring a new opportunity for the smallholder agriculture and smallholder farmers also.
Small farmers feeding the future with sustainable agriculture. But with food prices soaring and worldwide malnutrition, could it be too much of a risk?
The future farming, I think, has a number of trajectories. One of those would be this more holistic attempt and interest by people to be part of a community that is biodiverse, that produces complicated foods, that produces good foods. But there also will always be a future for heavy production agriculture. It's hard for us to get away from that because it produces so much food for so many people around the world.
Chef Gaston Acurio agrees. Working together, Peru's big and small farmers could be a model for feeding the planet. A model inspired by patriotism, profit, and potatoes.
I believe in integration, in how we can take part in the same process, where we convince ourselves of our responsibilities for the future. It's in this balance between small farming in harmony with medium and large agriculture where Peru will become a beautiful world food power.
Old food the new way. It's the Peruvian dream of future food.